On the 6th, we'll come up with a date for Zoom. I'll reach out to Bill Colias about seeing if the PTA wants to organize anything on the blacktop. I'll leave it up to him. All right, so now we're going to move into some resolutions related to the district meeting. So for the approval of the resolution to appoint election personnel, maybe have the recommended action.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the resolution to appoint election personnel for the annual district meeting on May 20th, 2025 as listed.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the approval to adopt the 2025-2026 Haldane school budget and Proposition 1 for the annual district meeting on May 20th.
And this is a roll call. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the proposed Haldane School District budget for 2025-2026 in the amount of $30,154,390 as indicated in Proposition 1 below, to be presented to voters of the Haldane Central School District at the annual district meeting on Tuesday, May 20, 2025, in the following abbreviated manner. Proposition 1, shall the Haldane Central School District be authorized to expend an amount not to exceed $30,154,390 during the 2025-2026 school year for the purposes shown in the statement of estimated expenditures by the Board of Education, with such sum to be raised by levy of tax upon the taxable property of the school district.
And we have to read it for the other propositions.
We already did those.
We did, okay, sorry, that's right. I forgot. All right, all those in favor? Aye? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Okay,
Did I do that last
sorry,
one too?
we didn't do a motion.
Oh, sorry, yes, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks very much.
Okay, President Clements,
Yes.
Vice President Valentine,
Yes.
Trustee McNow,
Yes.
Trustee Cupper,
Yes.
Trustee Clementson.
Yes.
So caught up on the propositions, I guess.
Okay.
And the approval of the property tax report card for 2025-2026. May we have the recommended action, please?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the attached property tax report card for 2025-2026, prepared by Ms. Catherine Platt, School Business Manager.
May we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And now, moving into the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES budget and then trustee candidates. So starting with the budget, may we have the recommended action, please?
Yes, and the budget is a roll call.
Okay.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the following resolution. Whereas the Board of Cooperative Educational Services of Putnam Northern Westchester County, thereinafter BOCES, has proposed its tentative administrative budget for the 2025-2026 school year. Now therefore be it resolved that the BOCES tentative administrative budget for the 2025-2026 school year in the amount of $12,136,000 be and hereby is approved by the board.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, President Clements.
Yes.
Vice President Valentine.
Yes.
Trustee McNow.
Yes.
Trustee Cupper.
Yes.
Trustee Clementson.
Yes.
And the vote on the two PNW BOCES trustee candidates. May we have the recommended action?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby casts a vote to fill two vacancies on the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES Board of Cooperative Educational Services for the period July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2028 from the following two candidates. Frank Schnecker of Ossining, New York, and Tina McKay of Putnam Valley, New York.
Maybe have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
This is also roll call?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the PNW BOCES regionalization meeting. But I think we talked about that during your comments. Yeah, we did. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
I think we
great.
covered it.
It was, I was actually really glad to go and to see, just see all the superintendents they had met in advance and come up with those ideas, right? So the board members there, we were really just listening and learning. It was really the constituent district superintendents who had come up with those lists of things, and it was just good to see it in
Were
action.
any processes mentioned whereby these meetings could come to fruition, be seen in action, or how that might?
You know, I came away with the feeling, maybe I misunderstood that Neil was even thinking we might not meet on May 5th, because at the very end, because we kind of need to wait and wait and see, because a lot of it really kind of depends on, is there money to do things? Like, so
Gotcha.
people so transportation, right? So if you're, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was, if you're talking about all these small districts not having to, but yes, needing to transport some children to out of district placements, is there some way for people to collaborate to do that, right? But like, that takes like somebody to coordinate it, right? And where does that money come from? Or the idea about, pre-Ks, for example, like theoretically, like, could you collaborate more with, pre-Ks across districts, for example, or what I feel like there were the transportation was one of the ones. Oh, some of the stuff, some of the ideas with for English students who are learning English as a new language who are older, right? Like, if for because of the way New York State is set up, you have all of these really, honestly, really relatively small school districts, right? And so for some of these things to happen, you would need there to be shared services, but it takes money and coordination to do that, and it's not really clear where that would come from. That was my main takeaway.
Mine as well. Yeah, I think it's money and maybe some policy changes.
Yeah.
Things that could potentially go through BOCES, we could receive aid on it. If we, use some shared services. So, I think the idea, to answer your question, Sean, is that next school year, I believe the idea would be come up with a finalized plan from each region throughout the state, present it to state ed. And look, we may learn of proposals in other regions that maybe apply to us as well. So I think it'll really, through the course of next year, I think there'll be a lot of back and forth between the state, the BOCES, and then hopefully there's some positive results as a result of the collaboration.
Great, thank you.
All right, so next on the agenda is acceptance of a proposal from Tectonic to conduct, oh gosh, I had this written down, basically a geologic survey that is needed as a next step in the capital project planning. Recommended action.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby accepts the letter proposal from Tectonic Engineering Consultants, Geologists, and Land Surveyors, DPC, dated March 11, 2025, as presented to the board at this meeting for professional surveying services in connection with the district's capital project at the Haldane Central School District campus, at the fee of $18,000 for boundary topography survey and $7,950 for tone out services, and authorizes the board president to execute the letter agreement with Tectonic with modified general terms and conditions of agreement.
May I have a motion, please?
Removed.
Second.
Pretty straightforward, a required next step that I think Colombo needs in particular to begin to think about pricing out some of these components. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So this next item on the agenda is the approval to temporarily suspend policy 3430, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a big deal. It's a long resolution. And so I'm actually going to ask you to
Yeah,
read
I'm
the
gonna read
entire
it.
thing,
Yes.
and then we'll take a motion about discussing it.
Okay, whereas on January 21, 2025, President Trump issued an executive order entitled Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunity, which in part addressed public school district diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the context of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And whereas Title VI prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, and whereas following the issuance of the January 21, 2025 executive order, the U.S. Department of Education issued a February 24, 2025 Dear Colleague letter reaffirming the non-discrimination obligations of schools receiving federal financial assistance from the U.S. DOE under Title VI, stating that such schools may not use race as a factor in admissions, financial aid, hiring, training, and other institutional programming, referring to DEI programs and policies and as impermissibly granting a preference to certain racial groups, and stating an intent on the part of the US DOE to begin enforcement of the law pursuant to this interpretation no later than February 28, 2025. Possibly leading to the loss of federal funding. And whereas on March 5, 2025, the offices of the Attorneys General for 13 states, including New York and the District of Columbia, issued guidance disagreeing with the analysis contained in the February 14, 2025 Dear Colleague letter related to DEI programs. The enforceability of the US DOE's position on DEI has also been challenged in federal court. And whereas in April 2025, the US DOE issued a directive requiring that states and local educational agencies certify by April 24, 2025, its compliance with the US DOE's interpretation of Title VI or face the possible loss of federal funding. And whereas on April 4, 2025, the New York State Education Department issued a response to the US DOE indicating that it would not be certifying compliance with the US DOE's interpretation of Title VI and DEI initiatives. And whereas the Haldane Central School District currently receives approximately $450,000 in federal funding, and whereas the Haldane Central School District currently has a non-mandated policy number 3430, entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, that may, in part, be inconsistent with the US DOE's interpretation of Title VI. And whereas the possible loss of federal funding would have a devastating impact on the district's ability to meet the needs of its students. Therefore, be it resolved that pending clarification of the conflict between the respective positions of the state and federal governments regarding Title VI and DEI, the Board of Education does hereby suspend policy 3430.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
So that's a lot of words. For people watching, I feel like we should just do a little bit of a summary about what was just said and what the resolution is calling for, and then give the board the opportunity to talk about it. I can start and you can jump in. I think you have a better handle on me. So basically you have executive orders that were signed after the inauguration, where the administration is, I think, paraphrasing, is equating DEI with racial discrimination, and therefore saying that as a result, DEI policies are violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. As anybody following the news can, you know, that happened back in January, and they went out to this, and then the federal administration went out to the states and required that states certify that they were not, that their districts were not, did not have these kinds of policies. New York State is one of the states that said that they, actually, I don't even think I have a good enough command of all the ins and outs, but basically that it was inappropriate for the federal government to ask for them to do that. And so there's now basically it's pending, right, between the state and the federal government about whether the federal government has the right to require that districts not have these policies in place in order to qualify for federal funds. And it's all happened shockingly quickly, right? Like, you know, to the extent, just so that the public knows, that really, it's really been in the past few days that the superintendent has become more aware of it, and me, and then even the board. And so so I guess actually at this point, maybe I'll turn it over to you, if you
Sure.
don't mind.
No, yeah, I think you did a great job of explaining it, but basically, approximately 3 or 4 years ago, New York State strongly recommended that all public schools adopt a DEI policy. They didn't specify, you know, exact language. That was up to individual districts. There were some frameworks put out, models put out by Erie One BOCES, which most districts use. So Haldane did in 2022 adopt a DEI policy, although it's not a required policy. Like most districts, we did and embraced that. However, right now, the federal government, you know, is pushing back on DEI. The state is pushing back on the federal government. And, you know, that will play out however it plays out. But most of our funding is from state, but a portion of it is federal funding. And again, you know, the resolution, if you heard 450,000, which is IDEA money, title funds, as well as our school lunch program. So that's a significant amount of money, and we're hearing from the U.S. Department of Education that could be at risk if you keep these policies in place. The state is saying you cannot withhold that funding that was approved by Congress. So our legal guidance from our law firm is to temporarily suspend the policy, go ahead and certify, and let this play out between the state and the federal government. Because, you know, that's just a significant amount of money that would be really challenging for our district to make up the loss of $450,000. So with that, we could open it up to the board, questions or discussion.
Well,
Go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
Well, I mean, I guess part of me can't believe that we're sort of at this place, right, where we're questioning the goodness of a policy that's promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that all students are receiving equal and inclusive services. However, here we are, right? And I can be comfortable, I feel, suspending for the time being this policy to see if it can be rewritten to be in compliance and to stay true to our beliefs. And I would say I would want to prioritize our beliefs. And I think, you know, I have been assured that there will be no change to curriculum, no change to treatment of students. And I think there will come a time where we might want to get input from the public, and I would welcome that.
And that is one thing that's suspending, right? So
Mhm.
suspending, again, at the strong recommendation of the district's council and Mr. Albano's consideration of that, suspending it just gives us an opportunity to see what's going to happen, what's going to play out, but then also to more thoroughly consider what we want our next steps to be. So thanks very much, Michelle.
I mean, Michelle, you sort of, I don't want to reiterate what you just said, but I just wanted to say that I think we're all in agreement that even in adopting or drafting this particular policy, it was really a process whereby we codified a cultural commitment that was already in place so that the policy its suspension doesn't really in any way impact how we're operating and what our commitments are. So that should be seen as a retraction in any way of how we are going to conduct ourselves as a district moving forward. So much as a genuine legal liability that it's our responsibility to prevent the district from being exposed to. So.
Yeah.
And I think what I would say is that, I mean, I remember I was on the policy committee with Maggie when we were talking about this, and one of the things where we really were focusing on, I think, primarily in thinking about the policy and the culture is really how students are treated, right? The idea that all students are treated, are valued, are respected, are embraced, right? And that was a practice that was going on before we even had the policy. I mean, and not maybe that we always did it perfectly, but that's really definitely what our goals were as a district, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, and I remember even thinking at the time, like, I understand I understand that why there is a call in some ways for the policy, but also really believing already that what we were doing did really value students. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm being very articulate.
No, I just wanted to reiterate what everyone has already said before. We sat down to work on this, and it was just sort of like not an umbrella policy, but it was a policy just to sort of finalize the work that's already been done, which has already been said. But before I even took my first term on the board, I had a discussion with high school principal Julia Sniffen about some of the work that they do. I mean, so the work is being done, on all different levels in many different ways, thanks to our administrators and our staff. So I think that we can be pretty confident in, things evolve, but in the work that they're doing. So I appreciate that, and I have faith in the people who are actually working with our kids, as well as other facets of the district. And I'm confident that work is being done that needs to be done, at the moment. So.
I like Maggie's term. I have the faith in what is being done.
Yeah.
And this pause is inadvisable decision. I understand where it's coming from, but I don't see how it would change how we treat our students and how our faculty understands its role.
Right. And even actually, even so, I think my understanding is that the hiring is a big issue around this. And I think the district's policy, so what the district has worked really hard to do is to continually expand the network that we have of throughout the region to identify the most highly qualified candidates, right? And that's the work that Josh has been working so hard to do, and doing with the support of his colleagues on the administrative team, and I guess other teachers who are part of any search process, right? Is the idea is to attract, again, the most qualified candidates, that come, and that's been the focus of the districts, and by reaching out into further places, right, to make sure that there are all kinds of people, right, might be interested in applying to work at Haldane. And then at that point, again, finding the people that we think can serve our community the best and who are excited to be here. So it's interesting. I don't think any of us really noticed a big shift in practice after the policy was adopted, and I don't, because the focus has been, as we've been talking about, I don't anticipate there to be necessarily a big shift after the policy is paused. But then also by pausing it temporarily, it gives the community, I think this is important, an opportunity to engage in a more meaningful conversation about this if there is a need for us to change the policy, or a need for us to completely rescind a policy like this, and how we would want to move forward.
Yep. I mean, I could say that as your interim superintendent, in practice, we are not violating Title VI. We do not discriminate against students or any employees based on race, color, national origin. So, you know, that I am very comfortable certifying this. And again, if the policy is something that potentially could cause us to lose funding, I think this is a wise decision at this point.
All right. If no one has anything else they want to say? All of those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so now then we need to certify our compliance with the provisions of Title IX of the Civil Rights
Title
Act.
VI, yeah.
Oh, what did I say? Yes, Title VI, sorry. Me and Roman numerals. All right, so may we have the recommended action, please?
Be it resolved that be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby certifies its compliance with the provisions of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and in its decision-making and policies, consistent with United States Supreme Court precedents set forth in the case of Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College, 600 U.S. 181, 2023. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute whatever governmental certifications may be required.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the second opportunity for communication from the public. Board reflections?
Just a quick note, we did hear about the golf team, but I would like to point out that we have a current undefeated softball team.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Led by Ezra's daughter on the strip picture, so led by all of them. Team, we have 14, which is a team.
That's
Over
insane.
100, right? Over 100.
Oh, no,
And
she's,
she's an
she's
eighth grade.
over 150 now. Yeah, but that's a team effort,
Mm-hmm.
and the team is hitting the ball great. That's the
It's
big deal.
actually, I need some advice. I need to figure out who to reach out. Maybe Tom, because I want to know, I don't want to go to a lot of games, but I want to go to like one track meet, one softball game, one baseball game.
That's right.
The right one to go to. Which one should I go to? So anyway, it all sounds very exciting. It's great. Thank you for pointing that out. It was. All right. All right, so that is it. Oh, actually, so the board is going to convene into executive session for the purposes of discussing contract negotiations with the CSEA, as well as discussing the employment history of a staff member, staff.
Great.
And so I'm going to move to go into executive session. May I have a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.